Hello, my name is Brad Olson. I'm the author of a book called Sacred Places North America, 108 Destinations. And I'm going to read a passage from that book on the prehistoric stone buildings of New England while you watch this photo montage of photos from 4 very interesting stone chamber sites that I recently visited in June 2013. But first, a little backstory. Upon settling on their new farms in New England, colonial homesteaders were surprised to discover curious one-story stone buildings embedded into hillsides or completely underground. Scattered across a half a dozen states in New England are hundreds of remarkable stone chambers made of dry masonry. Some of these structures are freestanding or sunken into the earth, whereas others are accessed by passageways driven into the hillside. The most elaborate are described as, quote, beehive chambers, indicative of the conical shape of their ceilings. Some were completely underground and were discovered only years later when a roof caved in or a farmer's plow or pickaxe penetrated the chamber. Their age was usually authenticated by trees hundreds of years old growing into their unmortared walls or megalithic roof slabs. Many contained elaborate smoke holes to ventilate the chambers, as well as stone-crafted recesses built into the walls, or even benches and shrines. It is unfortunate to mention that a vast majority of these original New England stone buildings have been torn down for quarried stone, bulldozed over for modern development, repeatedly vandalized, or otherwise dismantled, destroyed, and abandoned. Hey, we're at the Woodstock 2 stone chamber. This is the main chamber. There's a menhir not too far over there, standing up in that field if you can see it.
Let's see, well, not from here. Exactly, okay, there we go.
There it is.
Zooming in.
That's a menhir, that's a standing stone. And there was another menhir by the car, just down the valley, but we can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's an entrance to a dolmen chamber. And we have the characteristic megalithic slab architecture for the side walls, but more especially for the top of the chamber. And let's go in and see if we can pick this up.
Will be a little dark.
Okay, well the top of these slabs, if we can see them, these are the lintels. These are the top slab stones. And let's count them out. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 megalithic slabs for the ceiling. There's an altar and a shrine stone here that's sticking out, as well as a chimney draft hole. So clearly built for living, with quite an investment of time and labor to make this happen. Indian sweat lodge, colonial root cellar, or a beehive chamber of the Celtic culture Culdee monks. That's where I'm at. Tribesmen and were free for the taking, the colonial farmers put them to use as extra storage space shelters. These numerous chambers were circular or rectangular in form, up to 30 feet, 9 meters in length, but usually half that, and up to 10 feet or 3 meters wide and 8 feet or 2.4 meters high, but sometimes more. The conventional wisdom at the time was that these enclosures were built as colonial root cellars or, quote, steam baths for Indians. These dismissive theories conveniently overlooked several basic facts, such as the passageways being too low and narrow to wheel a cart into, having soil floors that would rot vegetables, or that nowhere else in North America did Indians construct sweat lodges made of stone. But if not European colonials or Native Americans, then who could be responsible for their construction? Where else in the world are beehive enclosures of this kind located? Like nowhere else, the chambers closely resemble structures built by Culdee monks from Scotland and Ireland, who adapted the building style from their Celtic ancestry. The mysterious stone structures of New England remain as evidence for a long suspected pre-Columbian association with the Old World of Europe. The Culdee monks are known to have been driven from their home countries by Norse invaders around 800 CE, only to flee along the Atlantic, quote, stepping stones to Orkney Island, Iceland, and Greenland, where they again hastily retreated from the Vikings in the year 1007, this time presumably traveling to the New World. Many of the New England beehive stone structures were constructed long before Christopher Columbus's voyage to the New World. They may be as old as the Celts themselves, who, along with their Phoenician alliance, were navigating the northern seas in the Atlantic the millennium before Christ. Arriving some 2,000 years later and perhaps overlapping upon existing structures, the Culdee monks arrived and required shelter for religious purposes. The monks would have cultivated a friendly interaction with the Indians and very likely were the first to introduce Christianity to the so-called, quote, savages. chamber, the menhir in the meadow, and I'm standing right next to a menhir in the woods. And you can see I'm 6'9" tall. This is at least 7, more like 8 feet tall menhir, and this is the smaller one of the two. Really fascinating sight right here in the hills above South Woodstock, Vermont. And we are on Celtic Hill Road, which is up from Morgan Hill Road from the town of South Woodstock. Only a mile or a mile and a half up the road. Very easy directions to find. Recommended you come here, but be respectful if you do, and certainly don't leave any waste or take any stones away or do any damage. These are very valuable sites that have not been recognized yet by archaeology or modern science, but I think the true story will be told someday, and we're here to do that. The medieval Culdee monks who lived in monastic settlements in Ireland, Scotland, and the outer Hebrides Islands created beehive dwellings resembling an igloo of stone. Unlike monks of this modern age, the Culdee, or worshippers of God, were married and had families. Their worship practices of 800 CE were a blending of Celtic paganism with Christianity, including older vestiges of Druidism mixed with outward forms of Catholicism. Druid practices, including human and animal sacrifices, continued in Ireland until St. Patrick drove out all the pagans, also identified as driving out the snakes, in the 6th century. Yet for many centuries, the two religions blended. After being displaced by North invaders, the Culdee monks took to the sea and headed north to Greenland, west to Labrador, and then south past Nova Scotia. New England has a similar climate to their home countries, yet was free of invasion or religious persecution. With them, the Culdee monks took their religious holidays, such as Easter, from the spring goddess Astore, and the Druid practice of determining annual cycles of the sun, moon, and the stars. Of the 275 very distinct drywall beehive chambers in New England, many have been determined to have astronomical orientations, or are associated with nearby standing stones or large cairns that may have once supported wooden posts. There are some 105 such chamber sites in Massachusetts, 62 in Connecticut, 51 in New Hampshire, 41 in Vermont, 12 in Rhode Island, and 4 in Maine.
I am inside of a beehive chamber on Dairy Hill, not too far from the Joseph Smith Birthplace Memorial in South Royalton, Vermont. And it took us a little snooping, but a neighbor just tipped us off on following the tree line up Dairy Hill a little bit, and we finally came across a very narrow entrance, which you'll see shortly. We had to shimmy through and got a little dirty, but boy, once inside, this chamber is amazing. Here we have a total round beehive leveling up structure to a massive lintel capstone, truly megalithic in size. And all of the stones around are of dry masonry, and there's also a real big slab at the very bottom on the floor here. We got a great big megalithic. Apart from the very large lintel capstone, there's a couple other large ones that are supporting it, but not so many megalithic stones within the wall. But this chamber is truly a gem. All the things we do for research. This is one of the narrowest entrances any chamber I've visited. But inside, it's about 10 feet all the way around with a giant lintel cap and at least 2 air holes that we could detect from the top. But this is a great chamber. Show you real quick some of the vents that we can see. Here's one with a tree growing right on top of the chamber, but there was some light coming out of that one. Now you can see Dairy Hill Road, how close we are. And it looks like a conservation group put this bucket on to preserve this other hole, which went right into the main hearth area. So this clearly appears to be a fireplace vent. What a great chamber find.
During the golden age of Irish civilization, contemporary with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, Celtic navigators were known to have voyaged to Iceland and Greenland. That the Celtic Irish settled in North America before the Vikings is almost certain, for reports of traders from Iceland who entered Hvitramannaland, or the land of the white men, were recorded by both early and contemporary historians. Sometime later, the region became known as Ireland Milcla, or Great Ireland, and eventually renamed Albania, also meaning white man's land. 20 years after Leif Erikson discovered the colony he named Vinland after the wild grapes that grew wild there, as related in the Arabeggia saga, a party of Norsemen landed in Hvitramannaland and discovered a thriving Irish settlement. It seems clear that these settlements along the St. Lawrence were there long before the Norse excursion in 1020 CE. Subsequent Norse migrations to eastern Canada and New England took place in the 11th and 12th centuries, and again in the 14th century at the conclusion of the Greenland colonies. Although Cartier and later explorers found no Celtic or Norse people per se, after several hundred years it is reasonable to assume that they had assimilated culturally and genetically with the native tribesmen. Viking invaders were known to quickly merge with the people whom they conquered by adopting the native language without changing materially its structure or inflections. It is interesting to note that there are many Old Norse, quote, loan words in the various Iroquois and Algonquin languages. Many mythological stories of these tribes could be found from the pages of the Old Norse tales of Odin and Thor. Their ancestors, says the Iroquois creation, quote, myth, came from the east or the northeast. Apart from similar traditions and social customs, another telling sign of Northern European diffusion was the Iroquois adaptation of the Norse-style longhouse, so prolific in 16th century Quebec and Ontario provinces in Canada that the unified tribes called themselves the League of the Longhouse. The early Scandinavians up to the 12th century and the Iroquois throughout colonial history lived in dwellings that were different from all other Native American communal houses. The Iroquoian code for compensation and death, as described in Thwaites' Jesuit Relations, was almost identical to the Viking code, the law governing the payment of bog, stipulating an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life. To take revenge was not only a right, but practically a religion in both cultures. The Jesuits observed this strict practice with the Iroquois, and like the Norse, both had a fixed scale of atonement levied in regard to the slain person's status. The explorer Jacques Cartier had no way of knowing this complex law when he captured a neighboring chief and several others to bring them back to France. All of Cartier's Indian captives died except one young girl. Cartier again visited Hochelaga, which is modern-day Montreal, in 1542, but this time he was met with extreme hostility, forcing him to immediately return to Quebec City, his fort, with the new chief in hot pursuit. Cartier made no mention on the current state of Hochelaga on his records, probably because this time he was fleeing for his life. In the hills surrounding Boston, Massachusetts, the Upton Stone Chamber is one of the largest and most precisely built beehive chambers in New England. This chamber is aligned to observe the setting solstice sun and stars of the Pleiades as marked by cairns on nearby Pratt Hill. The Wendell Beehive Chamber in Massachusetts is very similar in size and design to the nearby Pelham Chamber, both being about 4 feet or 1.2 meter tall in the main chamber, constructed of mortar-free masonry in the shape of a beehive and covered over with earth. In Massachusetts, the Upton Stone Chamber is located on private land just outside of the town of Upton on Elm Street, about 12 miles or 20 kilometers southeast of Worcester. Across the valley from the chamber is Pratt Hill, where several cairns are located near the summit. The Wendell, quote, cave is located on a hillock known as Mountain Mineral, about 12 miles or 20 kilometers north of Pelham in Franklin County. Pelham Chamber is on private land, 2 miles, 3.5 kilometers west of the Quabian Reservoir on Route 202 in Hampshire County.
Hey, we are inside the Upton Stone Chamber, which is now a city park in the town of Upton, Massachusetts, and it is finally being recognized and preserved, which is a huge step in the understanding and long-term preservation of these sites. We're in a chamber with about a 20-foot ceiling, an air chamber, which may be a chimney vault. We've got niches in the wall. We've got like an altar area. We're standing in about 2 feet of water. It's quite chilly in here. And it's dripping as well, but we're in a characteristic beehive chamber with corbelled upward vaulting and once again a massive lintel stone on the top. The capstone is megalithic in size, as well as some of the stones holding it up. This is the mother of all stone chambers in New England, and I'm very, very happy to see that it's just been preserved as a state park. So we're going to show you now the entranceway out of here, which is among the longest of the stone chambers, and utterly amazing. I'm emerging from the Upton Stone Chamber, and I noticed in the gallery leading into the larger beehive chamber quite a few more of these lintels, about 5 of these massive megalithic capstones holding up the entranceway. Like I said, this is one of the longest entryways I've seen in any of the stone chambers. We're bare feet because it's quite wet in there. Let's go up and see if we can find the chimney slot. And here it is. So this is an example of some dolmen stones, and this slot takes a little slant, but it was quite illuminating once you're inside there. Once all our eyes adjusted to the light. A little inconvenience being barefoot and wet in there, but what a stone chamber. This one is great. Come to Upton, Massachusetts. It's now on parkland. It's no longer private. It's legal to come here, and it's a park for the whole family to enjoy.
The mostly pagan Vikings followed a few decades later, led by the recently Christianized Leif Erikson and his colonization of Vinland by Greenland Vikings. These Vikings would also have traded with the Indians, or the Skraelings as the Norse called them, but continued to have bloody conflicts with the natives, which include the death of Leif's younger brother Thorvald. Eventually, the various prehistoric European settlers assimilated with the Indians, and over time their descendants reflected their mixed heritage. All up and down the northeast coast were the, quote, white Indians, mixed with darker-skinned Indians, who incorporated into their culture many northern European traits, including language, writing, peculiar customs, and building practices. These similarities amazed the first 14th century European sea captains as they charted the Atlantic seaboard. The French explorer Jacques Cartier's account of his first visit in the year 1535 to the New World described the Iroquois Indians who lived along both banks of the St. Lawrence Seaway. How did the Iroquois achieve such a refined state of development, as Cartier observed? Ethnologists are still unclear on the origins of their culture or readily acknowledge that the Iroquois were an amalgamation, a mixture of several cultural types. It is a strong likelihood that the Iroquois-speaking tribes along the St. Lawrence River and upper New York State were the partial direct descendants of their assimilated northern European peoples who arrived 600 years before Cartier. in southeastern Connecticut near the town of Groton in New London County is the enigmatic Gungewamp site. The Thames River mouth in Connecticut has a large collection of ancient chambers, the most extensive being a complex called Gungewamp, originally thought to be an Indian word, but now translated in Gaelic as meaning, quote, Church of the People. Besides containing 2 beehive chambers and petroglyphs, Gungewamp has 2 sets of double concentric circles comprising 21 large quarried stones laid end to end just north of the chambers. It also boasts a number of megaliths, cairns, and marked stones of a bird and carved letters. On the spring and fall equinox, sun rays penetrate an opening in the west wall of one chamber, suggesting Gungewamp was an astronomical observatory. Another prominent ancient observatory site is at South Woodstock, Vermont, consisting of stone chambers, standing stones, and cairns in a natural bowl surrounded by hills and ridges, as we've just seen. Besides having close proximity to water waves, the beehive structures would have been interconnected by an intricate network of footpaths. With such an abundance of stone structures in New England, what follows is a description of some of the most prominent chambers and associated prehistoric access routes. The Merrimack River Valley in Massachusetts and New Hampshire was a seemingly active avenue for ancient voyagers and their riverside settlements, as was Connecticut's Thames River drainage and the Connecticut River extending up north to Quebec, Canada. So here we are at the base of some cliffs by Gungewamp, and you just saw the swamp there. This would have provided them a good source of food, such as fish, birds, frogs, other little things to eat. And all around the Gungewamp site are these low walls. My thinking is this could have been a fortress, because the site is right up on top of these cliffs on a plateau. Would have given you some pretty good protection. Plus there's some natural caves up there. Could have been used for shelter or storage of food. It's a very strategic site. It's very much a complex of different sites to see here in Gungewamp, Connecticut, and a great place to come and explore for the day. So here we are at a circle of presumably once standing menhir stones. Now it looks like it's used as a campfire pit for the Boy Scouts. This was originally how I found the site. We were looking all over the place for it, and I recognized this stone circle in a book. So I knew it was a significant site as far as this being part of the complex. And then right across here is the stone wall remains of what looks like could have been colonial era, could have been something else, but certainly the foundation, some kind of structure. All we can say right now is it's called Site 6. It's got like 2 little niches here as rooms. Perhaps once had been covered over.
You know what you're doing.
Go ahead.
There you want to lean back against that tree?
Okay, we're at a place called Site 2 in the Gungewamp, Connecticut
complex. We're on the top of a cliff escarpment. We just hiked up a pretty steep hill. This is on a Boy Scout camp, so it's still private property. But there's an archaeological team that comes here and tags these sites and preserves them. This is the smaller of the two chambers. Don't want to go into it because it's quite filled up with water in there. But it's a little beehive chamber. Great big couple of lintels on top. Megalithic structure. Pretty cool site. Let's go find the bigger one. So this is the window to the largest chamber here at Gungiwap. And this window aligns with the summer solstice, I would believe sunset, because we're only a couple weeks away from summer solstice right now. And it would appear that the sun is going to shine right through this chamber. And let's go check out the entrance. Go inside. Again, we got a flooded site, but this one's pretty similar to the Woodstock 2 one we were at. More of a rectangular shaped, but kind of rounded in the back. And what we got is a couple huge characteristic lintel stones as a ceiling on the top. And there's our sighting window out there.
Rolling.
Hey, I'm going solo with the camera this time to show you the interior of the large chamber here at Groton, Connecticut. And it corbels up quite like a beehive chamber. Here's looking out the solstice window. And here we can see some megalithic slabs. Come to the very end of the wall and look out. Look at these ceilings. Wow, look at those big boys. Oh yeah. This is the best chamber here at Gungiwap, Connecticut. Replete with solstice sightings, megalithic architecture, and within a complex, a larger complex of other chambers, other structures, as well as the stone circle we just saw. Quite a wonderful site. Shipyard. It's located in a private Boy Scout camp. In Vermont, the vast South Woodstock complex is on private land surrounding the town of the same name. Nearby Elephant Valley in South Royalton, Vermont, is home to the famous Calendar One site.